having a presence is really important. A lot of people start fearing that there's going to be cannibalization. So having the right set of insights that you've already gathered in terms of what is the right discounting strategy, pricing strategy, merchandising strategy, right? Copy that you should be writing, right? Informed by the reviews that you've gathered yourself, right? All of those things should be informing how you're going to be launching and optimizing for Amazon, right? Maybe you only make a limited set of SKUs available on Amazon. Maybe you make the deal always just a little bit worse than what you have on your DTC site, right? So then the incentive is going to flow towards you, towards the customer essentially getting back to your website. But there's also a lot of benefits to having a bigger presence on Amazon, right? So Amazon advertising is actually the fastest source of marketing spend growth among our customer base. Mm-hmm. And within that, Amazon branded advertising is the fastest growing sub vertical, still quite small, mm-hmm. but people are using Amazon as a brand awareness channel already, right? We're already seeing, how did you hear about us? Amazon, right? Even though they converted on DTC. So knowing kind of having as much kind of insights before you go into Amazon is critical.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm super excited to be chatting with Fei Wang today, who's founded Source Medium. And so we'll start off with sort of what was the origin story, because obviously entrepreneurs usually are driven by some kind of a problem mm-hmm. that they want to solve for themselves, or they want to solve it for someone else, and it turns into a business idea. So I'd love to hear what the catalyst was for you.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, for the opportunity to get on the podcast and speak to your audience. Super excited. So Source Medium, just real quick, we help omnichannel marketers make data-driven decisions. We focus on the commerce vertical specifically. In terms of the origin story, it actually kind of goes all the way back to my first job. I had the fortune of landing Google within their Google Ads division. It's called AdWords back then. Specifically working with mid-market advertisers to help them look at the data that they are already essentially generating every single day and identify optimization and growth opportunities. So that's kind of where I got to really see just how powerless businesses are with the data that they technically already have access to. And of course, there's and continues to be a lot of wastage that happens, right, when it comes to digital marketing. And and data has like a lot of those answers, right? So that's still a problem till this day. And then fast forward to 2017, I joined a company called Resident Home as the VP of product. And in 2018, I kind of got to participate in a very special scaling moment as we went from 7 to 9 figures in run rate in 1 year. We were the fastest growing online retailer that year. And as we added a lot of different levels of complexity, omni-channel, multi-region, multi-brand, right? Data became a huge issue for us. And I basically had to do a lot of this by hand, right? From the perspective of a brand operator, and just kind of realizing how difficult it is, because brands fundamentally are not technology builders, right? Some of the best brands are really sort of purchasers and selectors of technology and deploying them for ROI, right? So today, Resident Home is the biggest online mattress retailer in North America. So I kind of realized that I had a unique advantage in terms of being a part of that journey every step of the way, and understanding where the data needs actually are as the organization matures, which then sort of informs a lot of how we serve our customers today still.
Great. Well, it seems like you were facing particular challenges which caused you to want to create Source Medium. So now you have an opportunity to get out there and talk to a bunch of other marketers who may have very different buyer journeys, than the ones that you were trying to solve against. Like they may be more of an impulse buy where
Totally.
it's a very considered purchase. And so obviously all those different scenarios result in different types of data, different buying cycles, different KPIs that you might be optimizing around. So I'd love to hear sort of what pain points the other customers or your prospects are trying to solve and how those differ potentially from what you were trying to solve against.
Yeah, totally. So there are actually a lot of similarities in the pain points that brands experience, and that typically would arise when there's sales and marketing channel complexity where their revenue growth has reached a certain point, so if you added Amazon to your mix, for example, or you expanded into the UK. So that all creates a lot of data complexity, right? You can't just sort of look at platform reporting and sort of be done with it, right? So that's where people really kind of come to us for a solution that not only sort of solves that today, but can also scale with them tomorrow. And then the other thing is around organizational complexity, right? When the organization has grown, right, the need for a single source of truth and one consistent way of understanding data becomes stronger and stronger, right? Because what ends up happening is, at the top of a meeting, folks are spending half the meeting just figuring out whose metrics to use, right? And where they come from and why I do trust it or I don't trust it, right? So that's essentially when we get deployed in the organization where there is a very strong sort of set of defaults and opinionated framework around how an omnichannel retailer can look at their data. So this is actually when a lot of people come to us for that, for those best practices, and they get a lot more about adopting those things, and incorporating it into their culture.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. One thing that's happening this year that's sort of, I guess, big news in the analytics world is obviously, Google is forcing everybody to move over to GA4, right? So
yeah, totally.
And I get the sense that, that's changing how folks are using secondary management, measurement and analytics platforms, which may or may not incorporate data out of GA4, but or may have their own data sources. And it to your earlier point about a single source of truth, like for many people, even though they knew it wasn't true, they still use Google Analytics as a single source of truth because it was sort of the best that they had, right?
Yeah.
Now with the new GA4, a lot of stuff is being removed and a lot of stuff is changing. And so I feel like it's a little bit of a catalyst for like the secondary measurement platforms, perhaps yourselves included. So how is that changing, how your prospects and clients are sort of engaging with your platform or other data?
Yeah, I mean, the GA4 transition has definitely been one of the biggest events of the year, in the marketing world. And what we're seeing right now that we're a little bit behind the mandatory transition day, is that we're seeing the pixel setup and configuration remains a struggle, right? It took years for essentially most of the internet to adapt to how GA Universal was set up and actually learn how those things work. Right now, very few people feel like they have a good grasp on how it actually works, right? So that obviously leads to a lot of misconfiguration, which leads to the data being even more inaccurate than before, which then combined with sampling, right? It actually creates a bigger issue when it comes to using that as a source of truth. But then, of course, now it's also harder, especially in e-commerce, for example, to just do the classic Shopify Meta and Google Ads setup and expect to be able to scale to a certain size. So if you need to expand into, let's say, Amazon or Walmart and these other sales channels, GA really isn't even an option, right?
Sure, yeah.
Secondarily, in GA Universal, there was a lot of pre-built visualizations and sort of user experience pathways that people learned over a long period of time, right? So a lot of those out of the box things don't seem to be there anymore, or they need to be recreated, right? With a more flexible UX, and people are not really getting there as well, right? So in terms of like why secondary measurement platforms becomes more important than ever is really this notion that your source of truth data, you already have access to that, right? They're just living in different places, right? So your sales data, customer data, line items, performance data, that's already in Shopify, Amazon, right? You don't need to rely on something like enhanced e-commerce to understand that, right? Your customer contact data, emails, SMS, right? That's already in your ESP. So GA remains a very effective and critical data source. But for example, for us, we use it for session count, user count, also enriching our UTM and attribution data. But we're not using it for almost anything else aside from that. And of course, then there's no sampling, right? When you actually have access to all of the underlying data there and you're looking at insights based on that.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up sampling a couple of times, and I think many e-commerce marketers had no idea that GA was not a census-based reporting, right?
Yeah.
And it's often doing sampling. And for some types of KPI, sampling is fine, especially as you're talking about large data sets. You know, you don't necessarily need exact data. But, you know, for a lot of e-commerce marketers, particularly in mid-market, and for other reasons, for larger e-commerce marketers, they may want access to census level data. So it seems to me like that was a real catalyst for you, is this multi-source, the ability to commingle multi-source data, including census level data from a Shopify, from an Amazon, Magento, or whatever they're calling it these days. Right?
Yeah.
You know, that really allowed you to create a much more holistic and much more accurate source of truth.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as far as I know, I think it's still the same in GA4. You know, there's 1% sampling for hits and 10% sampling for events. So, you know, what that means, right? A hit is like, you know, a page view or whatever. If you have 100 hits, Google is only going to use one of those hits, right? 1 out of 100, right? And then they're using statistical sort of weighing and there's other things to essentially give you the directional insights there. So, you know, that will remain to be, you know, a good way of essentially understanding some of your data in terms of directionality. But, you know, I wouldn't do a board report on that, for example, right? And sort of those kind of caveats and things needs to be sort of built into the mental model. But, you know, and that kind of a methodology is fine in the world where the actual configuration and pixel setup is well done. And, you know, we don't have all of these different types of privacy and OS level headwinds that's also making pixel-based tracking more difficult, right? So, but when you have misconfigurations and things like that, and your pixel collection is off, then that's going to introduce additional sources of chaos, right? Outside of whatever chaos sampling already introduces. So, you know, like I think the best folks can do in that kind of a scenario, right? If you do use GA as a source of truth, is to really make sure that you're making the right decision based on directional insights at least 80% of the time. And the directionality that it's telling you is correct, let's say at least 80% of the time, right? And then over time, then you're a little bit better off. But, you know, like the reason that brands, when they get bigger, they come to us is their accuracy requirement increases significantly, right? And I'll kind of leave this question with a particular analogy I like to use, which is, you know, if you're driving 20 miles an hour down a suburban neighborhood, you know, let's say 10% speed in either direction is okay, right? We're talking 22 miles an hour or 18, right? But if you're driving 150 miles an hour down the highway, right, 10, 20% off could actually be life and death. Yeah. So that's kind of what we provide essentially.
Yeah, that's a great point. Another element that it seemed like was a common thread across your platform was this attribution, right? As you're going multi-platform or like in using marketplaces, for example. So you might be on Amazon, you might be on Walmart, you might be on eBay. You know, Overstock rename themselves Bed Bath and Beyond or whatever they're doing, right? So you've got that plus, you know, you've got your DTC store. And so, understanding attribution becomes more and more important too. So I'd love to hear how you guys think about it and how your customers are more better understanding attribution as a result of using these multiple data sources in the same dashboard.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Our MO has always been to be the highest quality data provider in commerce. And so there's obviously an aspect to it that's about accuracy, but I think one derived nature that we kind of take when it comes to attribution is to focus on evergreen attribution levers, right? So things like promo codes, right? Things like UTM params, right? Things like, landing pages, SKUs, right? And also enriching that further with how did you hear about us survey answers, right? And all those kind of things will not be going away, right? Just because of an operating system update, right? So I think even with the newest version of iOS, I think Apple is going to be stripping away some of the tracking parameters in Apple Mail, I believe, but they're leaving UTMs untouched, right? So, and I think UTM will continue to be a key source of attribution information, whether that is today or 10 years from now, right? So what we really focus on is just to make sure we have the richest data there, the cleanest data there. So that's one side, right? But and to be clear, we have a number of brands that scale with us 3, 4, 5x, right, into the 9 figures that only use those things as their guidance for how to allocate budgets and channel mixes. We do also recognize that, right, media mix modeling and more modeling based technologies will now play, I think, an even bigger role because of just like less signals overall, right? So we work with partners directly on essentially making our data sets available to them when we have a joint customer, and a number of them have actually optimized their model relative to our data, right? So they can actually have a more accurate prediction on the other side. So in the media mix modeling world, that's kind of where we would work with a partner and work with our customer as a resource in terms of helping them think through, right? Is there complexity at a point where that makes sense?
Yeah, a related question to that is often, in particular, DTC retailers are often in market with a lot of different tentacles and a lot of different channels. And sometimes the channels will disagree because they choose to use, for their own reasons, their own pixel. And so you've got, for example, Meta/Facebook reporting certain either ROAS or CAC, and then you've got an affiliate network that's running in parallel, and of course they've got cookie windows, and so they're also reporting their own numbers, which look very positive to them, right? And so as you're as the brand is sort of getting all this mashed up data, is there any sort of common recommendations that you make to them with like how to deal with the fact when the sources by definition is going to disagree? Because even like cookie, cookie expiration time periods or windows of attribution are going to change the data pretty dramatically.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question, Kevin. So we really focus on making sure that all of those data points are together in order for you to make a decision, right? So in terms of marketing level reporting, right, relative to a marketing platform, right, we bring forth visibility in terms of what the platforms are reporting, right, what the aggregated conversion figures are based on UTM params, and also based on zero-party attribution. How did you hear about us survey, right? And we also will bring in essentially the modeled outputs from our attribution partners. So then the marketer with a data team internally can look at all of this together and make a determination for how they want to be thinking about it, right? And that's where we would actually have partners like agency partners that we choose to work with that can bring in the opinion layer, right? And the execution layer in terms of how all of that should work, right? But at least now everyone is on the same page about what they're looking at. The other thing then is going to be around tying these any sources of attribution data to a single object, right? So in this case, let's say tying that to an order, right? That order, there's only one. There's a unique order ID. There was money that changed hand. There was PI involved, right? But on that order, we would have things like what the promo code was, what the UTM was, how did that customer hear about you, right? Et cetera, where the affiliate level sort of claim to that particular order. So you may end up with, let's say, UTM is Google CPC, right? Which is very common. Campaigns, maybe your branded campaign, but that person actually heard about you through Amazon, they might say, which we're actually seeing more and more of, right? Amazon is a branding channel. And then, but they may be using, let's say, your Tim Ferriss podcast promo code. Right. So all of a sudden, those things are all true. Right. Because we're not making anything up here. Something had to have happened that way for that to even happen. So that's where, again, the organizations themselves can kind of come up with the weighing that they care about to get to the other side. And of course, all of that also feeds into the modeling layer, right? Whether you use a vendor or model it yourself to really think about how you want to model these different types of inputs.
Yeah, that's a great point. What about sort of data overload, right? That as you get bigger and bigger, right? The ability, obviously, when you're small, you can actually get super excited about looking at individual order codes and trying to untangle the mess, right? And but when you're getting 4,000 orders a day, you're starting to use aggregated data, but the volume of data gets pretty big. And so, what's your best recommendation as far as like dealing with data overload?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Definitely begins to happen very, very fast as you expand. My recommendation really is to work backwards from the decisions that you need to make, right? Don't worry so much about, well, do I have these data points or where am I going to go grab this data points, right? And spend weeks trying to do that. But rather, like, what are your daily driver decisions, right? So, as a growth marketing operator, there's a lot of intraday decisions that they make. But, as a CMO, right, that's a different set of decisions, right? So really kind of catalog down these decisions and then work backwards in terms of what data do we actually need, right? What are the set of metrics and KPIs we actually need to inform these decisions, right? What are kind of our requirements, for example, for the freshness of that data, the accuracy of that data, right? The fresher the data is, especially when it comes to intraday, the less accurate it's going to be, right? So understanding those levers is going to be the next big thing. And then, once you have that set of KPIs and metrics that you're going to be using to drive your decisions, right, that's where you can really begin to evaluate solutions out there in terms of, right, can they actually provide you with that, right? And then the last piece there is, right, around a set of visualization primitives, right? The goal here isn't to have fancy chart types and innovative ways of looking at data. The goal here is to have your workhorses, your line charts, your bar charts, your tables and things, right? Sorting priorities to help you get to those decisions quickly.
Yep, that's a really great point. Since we're the Did It team, wearing my Did It hat is buying a lot of media, right, across lower funnel media like search and sometimes social for a low consideration purchase, but then up and down the funnel. We're often trying to figure out with our clients, like, what's the predicted LTV and then what made those people similar to each other, right? Because if we're going to be spending money out there on media, if we can figure out how to buy the higher LTV customers, we can afford to pay more for that, which means we can actually be more aggressive in media buying.
Totally.
But we find that a significant percentage of new prospects that we're chatting with at conferences or whatever, they don't even have the business intelligence data to effectively answer the question, like, well, what makes the customers different that predicts the LTV? So,
Yeah.
since you guys are amassing all this data, which will eventually potentially be really useful in being predictive to LTV, how does Source Medium approach that problem of, okay, understanding, how do we tie back all these orders and how were they similar and how can we then use that to predict LTV when an order first comes in?
Yeah. That's a really interesting question. LTV has really become a central focus, in particular, this year and part, starting last year as well. So, we definitely think a lot about that, but I think a lot of folks jump to the predictive side of it maybe sooner than they necessarily need to, because, in stock market, people say, well, past performance doesn't indicate future performance, right? But in business, that oftentimes past performance can mostly tell you what's going to happen, right, in the future. So I think the first step there really is to have a LTV visibility into your business, right? But actually scrutinize the methodology behind that calculation, right? So for example, we build a lot of sensible defaults into our methodology, right? If the first order is fully refunded, well, that probably shouldn't make that customer a cohort, right? Customer. Or, within apparel, there's a lot of $0 exchanges and reshipments. Well, that's not a retained order, right? So having that level of specificity is very important. And then the next layer really is around the actual calculation, right? Are they using gross sales, net sales? Do they have the ability to show LTV based on profits, right? But then what is their methodology around arriving at, right, order level, line item level, customer level profits, right? Because a lot of marketers are being asked to only, expanding channels that are profitable, right? And of course, then the first step is like, well, okay, what is our profitability, right? A lot of people honestly have no idea. So that's kind of like what we just kind of offer out of the box. And then the next level there is in the specificity in terms of how you can slice and dice it, right? Being able to, for example, in our industry, there is a particular thing around subscription e-commerce as its own sort of standalone way of looking at data, right? Understanding your LTV on Amazon, right? So does the platform have the ability to give you those delineations and also being able to filter on, let's say, your acquisition order, UTMs or discount codes or how they heard about you and all kinds of, the purchasing SKU, right? All kinds of things like that. And that's really what's going to give you the visibility in terms of understanding, right? Okay, the customers that are converting on email on a last click basis, right, tend to have a higher LTV, right? That gives you enough of a starting place to dig in. Well, how can we understand the different flows and campaigns that are actually contributing to that, right? And double down on the things that are working.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the directionality of at least understanding, if you don't have the perfect formula, right, at least directionality will help you guide there. You mentioned coupon codes, which reminded me a really fun thing in a negative way, though, that we discovered for one client is they were heavy users of promo codes that could only ever be used by a new customer. Right? And it actually ended up completely muddying the water of their LTV calculation, because what people would do is they'd become customers with 3 different email addresses just so they could use the promo code. And so they were just heavy promo code users. But they were, if you actually took those 3 records and merged them in, they were actually really high LTV. But when you looked at them individually, they looked really bad. And so you would actually come to the wrong conclusion that promo codes decreased LTV because it was 3, people who then didn't order again, but it was actually one person with 3 different instances. And it is a really interesting data analysis to then try to merge these data sets together and answer the question the right way. Because if you answer it the wrong way, now you're making a strategic decision. Well, let's not use promo codes so often. But it was the type of promo code, right? New customers only was muddying the water, right? And so it's you sometimes find these problems in dirty data that were a byproduct of something completely different, right? And
Yeah.
so it's sort of, I think it's part of the fun, but at the same time, you got to be really careful as you're making a strategic decision that you didn't have bad data informing.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, the two ideas that inspires me. One is, the Charlie Munger quote, right? Show me the incentive, I'll show you the behavior, right? If
Yeah,
you
exactly.
incentivize people to only come as first time purchasers, it's almost inevitable,
Yeah.
But I think then secondly, to even get to that realization, well, you can't measure you can't manage what you don't measure, but
Right.
also you can't manage what you don't have visibility into. Right. So
Yeah.
having that visibility, and actually coming to that conclusion so that you're not sort of continuing with that strategy for longer than you really need to be, right? That's important. Actually, I have one more thing that I wanted to add is how important then that source of truth concept is, right? So we had a large retailer in the nine figures. They launched a campaign where it was purely for non-purchasers in their Klaviyo account.
Right.
Right. So basically anybody who hasn't purchased, right?
Yeah.
They gave them this promo code. It's one-time use, and they actually kind of lose money on that first order, right? With the expectation of LTV increase. But when we actually plugged in their data, what we saw with these set of promo codes is we have folks that's on their like fifth order, eighth order, ninth order, right? But the issue was actually within the ESP, how they were understanding
Yeah.
if someone sort of purchased or not in the
Yeah.
past,
Right.
right? So by relying on the ESP's delineation, they actually made that campaign not only not really work because most of the users were repeat customers, but also lost the business money, right? So that's kind of where the rubber really do hit the road when it comes to these kind of things.
Yeah, well, that definitely reinforces the fact that you have to have trust in the data, right? And that
Absolutely.
the bad data in means bad decisions out. Right? So
Mm-hmm.
sure that you don't have that situation.
Yeah.
Now, clearly, a lot of DTC retailers have a love-hate relationship with Amazon. Like it's a significant
Mm-hmm.
channel for them,
Yeah.
either FBA or FBM, or potentially even as a vendor, but usually it's FBA.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and they're selling direct on their own sites as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so, how do you recommend they use the limited level data that they get out of Amazon to inform their overall DTC strategy?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, it really kind of, we have two folds, right? One is folks that want to start, or maybe they just started, but the majority of their sales is still on Shopify, let's say.
Right.
The other one is, maybe it's already half and half, right? And the third one is like maybe the majority is actually on Amazon and they have DTC as kind of a supplementary. So you see this a lot, for example, in CPG, right? Where most of the revenue is between retail and Amazon, and they sort of have a DTC operation as a way to actually collect learnings and and cultivate direct relationships with customers. So to focus specifically on the case where it's about most of your sales is in Shopify, I think it's important to have a presence on Amazon because if someone sees you on YouTube or TikTok or even TV, streaming ads, what have you, right? There is a non-trivial chance that they're going to start either directly to the website, but more likely than not, it's going to be Google brand search or Amazon search, right? They will just start, right? Amazon is a starting destination in terms of discovery, right? So if you're not there, right, your competitor could be capturing that potential intent.
Yeah, sure.
Right, because now they have to get off the Amazon and actually find you somehow in terms of your website, right? So having a presence is really important. A lot of people start fearing that there's going to be cannibalization. So having the right set of insights that you've already gathered in terms of what is the right discounting strategy, pricing strategy, merchandising strategy, right? Copy that you should be writing, right? Informed by the reviews that you've gathered yourself, right? All of those things should be informing how you're going to be launching and optimizing for Amazon, right? Maybe you only make a limited set of SKUs available on Amazon. Maybe you make the deal always just a little bit worse than what you have on your DTC site, right? So then the incentive is going to flow towards the customer essentially getting back to your website. But there's also a lot of benefits to having a bigger presence on Amazon, right? So Amazon advertising is actually the fastest source of marketing spend growth among our customer base. Mm-hmm. And within that, Amazon branded advertising is the fastest growing sub vertical, still quite small, mm-hmm. but people are using Amazon as a brand awareness channel already, right? We're already seeing, how did you hear about us? Amazon, right? Even though they converted on DTC. So knowing kind of having as much kind of insights before you go into Amazon is critical. And then of course, the last thing that I'll say here is most of the time, the common thing that we see is Amazon folks are not looking at data much, or they're not looking at as much data as their DTC counterparts. Mm-hmm. And that actually creates organizational silos. So when we essentially activate both Amazon and DTC for our customers, they can actually come together, right? And have a common taxonomy, common language around how to understand the performance, but also understanding, hey, if we do a big brand awareness thing, are we seeing overall lift in the business combined? But definitely lots to talk about there. But
probably an entire track at a conference, actually.
Absolutely, yeah. Because don't even get me started on the other way. Mostly Amazon trying to start DTC. That's kind of its own thing as well. So
yeah, absolutely. So what has you excited about the next year? Obviously, on the business or just in general with the industry. Anything that you've got that you're excited about?
Yeah, for sure. I think, the people will continue to realize that they, just by operating, they actually have a ton of data, and they actually own that, mm-hmm. right? I think most people don't really realize that. So, as that realization begins, it continues to sort of spread, right? We will continue to be there to sort of support them in terms of owning that data, and then also, on that data. In terms of like things that we're going to be building towards, one is really about expanding into additional sales channels, right? We're seeing a lot of, for example, Walmart.com, Target.com, right? These type of marketplaces that are going to begin to rival, Amazon's dominance. And then the other piece is around, distributing our data in many different ways, right? So if for folks that are familiar with Supermetrics, we'll have all of those distribution methods, right? Piping our high quality data directly into your spreadsheets or your data warehouse, wherever it makes sense. And then the last thing there is around, start building into the predictive capabilities, right? Backed by machine learning and AI technology. So kind of what you mentioned around, predicting LTV or automatically creating customer segmentations and all kinds of anomaly detection, right? All kinds of things like that. We've waited patiently for the past 3 years to make sure that we have the best data, mm-hmm. Because that's really going to be the differentiation when it comes to AI. So now that we feel really good about that, we're going to, essentially open up more ways that people can consume not just the data, but the insights, right? And allowing them to be even more effective when it comes to data-driven decision making.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, Fei, for joining me. And it was a great learning about best practices in data and analytics and some of the stuff that's coming down the road. Look forward to watch your journey.
Thank you, Kevin, for having me, and really, really appreciate you giving me the time. So, for the listeners out there, definitely happy to talk. So you can email me directly at Frank EI Fei at sourcemedium.com, and looking forward to hearing from folks.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in the Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.